Hello again. Brian Jennings, the Millennial Dragon, right? The man who would have been the movie critic. This channel is about processing my case study of a relationship in clairvoyance with Quentin Tarantino, right? He set me up to be a movie star using his psychic occult mind game. And when he stuck his nose up at me and turned his back on me and expected me to be a telepath, I did the same thing. Because telepathy isn't interesting. Oh. And so now, right, he's had every opportunity between A to B, right, to compel me to silence, right? Where he pays me my Judas coin, my 33 pieces of silver. I sign my non-disclosure agreement. And then I'm just a fucking loser. Instead, right, he's, right, and this is why I've come into his life, right? This is why I did what I did, right? He has debased the mercy seat as well as his immortal soul, right? By entering into a campaign to overwhelm my mind to compel me to madness and suicide. So, I've written a novel. It's called Building a Coven, as in a witch's coven. And so we're reading through the novel, right? We're talking about the writing. We're talking about the nature of reality, right? We're talking about how Quentin does what he does, how I do what I do. And so setting out, I'm reminded of... Hello, good morning.
Hi.
That's my niece. She's great. I'm reminded of the introduction to Aleister Crowley's Liber 777, where he says something to the effect of, "If much learning hath made us mad, then we hope to have a plentiful supply of rubber cores to chew on in our old age." Right? So, my point being that the channel's been getting more attention. Right? I appreciate the comments of concern. Have a good day. You know you have shoes out there.
Yes.
Okay. The one guy, he said, can we talk? How can I help? And that was a nice thought. And so I told him, and I'll tell everybody who's watching this, if someone is actually interested in helping this situation, like come to an amicable resolution, all you have to do is write William Morris Endeavor, right? That's it, right? Mike Simpson, that's his agent, right? Care of William Morris Endeavor, 9601 Wilshire Boulevard. Right? Or if you didn't want to write them, right, you can write the movie theater that he owns, that I sent my first letters to, which is the Los Feliz 3, 1822 North Vermont Avenue. Right? So if you want, if someone actually wants to help, that's essentially the only way they can help. Beyond commenting, liking, subscribing, and sharing the channel. That's its own big help, Because it's all that's left is to talk about it. Right? Right? And so all of the comments about, me on drugs, me, taking medication, all of these things. Hang on, I got a cat. 1 second. Please. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Right, that level of irony is obnoxious and insincere, right? Oh, how predictable and boring. Someone has a sarcastic comment about my animated nature, right? I would say it's quite sad, actually, the state of spiritual disrepair that society is in, that I offer the keys to Solomon's temple, and they say, oh, he's schizophrenic. Right? And in so doing, right, give him exactly what he wants, right? And I've said this to my family, and they perhaps understand on some level, but they're not as learned, they're not as well read as I am. That psychiatry can't help me, right? Indoctrinated, reductionist, materialistic science, right? It has no bearing on the mercy seat, on the Holy of Holies, on the Ancient of Days, right? Therapy can help me, and that's why we're here right now, right? Right? And so I'm going to spend some time before I read on the novel, if I decide to. Discussing my worldview. I got a lot of views on my remote viewing lesson. Right? Quentin Tarantino is a powerful psychic clairvoyant who remote views people. Right? He jumps into the mind of the actors in his films. Right? Right? And so when I didn't, right, submit, right, in the way that he wanted, right, he decided, oh, I'm going to use my mind to destroy him. That's what he's been doing for the last year, right? Right? And so we're talking about it now, right? Because he's kicking it back off in December, right? And these things that he does, which he stole from me, because he's not actually wise, he's just clever, right? Are so disgusting and base, right? And that if it's just me and the people around him that protect and insulate his evil in on the joke, right? Then when he starts to make that film, he's going to torture me with a palpable evil that no court can ever try him on, right? So, the court of public opinion is its own court, isn't it? Right? And I've sued his agency, right? William Morris Endeavor. I suspect I'll get something in the mail this week, right? But, right? I arrive at my worldview very particularly, specifically, right? This is not a haphazard, arbitrary guesswork, right? That this is, right? And so, right, now I'll get more into that. I recently got a bunch of books in the mail, some of which I've already owned and read, but, right, God damn it. So, How the World is Made, John Michel, his last great masterwork, right? And so this diagram, right, a variant of it, many people have seen, and it's on my celestial vision board behind me, and we'll talk more about that later. So, How the World is Made, right? Coxeter, the 59 icosahedra, right? And so this one's tough. I've been looking at this one. That's the stellation diagram, right? And so, right, I could just print this out and be a fucking douchebag, right? But that's cheating, isn't it? So, right, I have my tool, right? The drafting compass, my instrument of divinity. And I'm figuring it out. I have to get a caliper that divides into the golden mean. And I can, like, mathematically, like in my mind, but I want that tool, you know. Anyway. Right. Weininger, spherical models. Right? Right? Savage book. Right? What else? Dual models. Right? And I have the other one in the mail. Polyhedron models. Right? All drafting compass. No cheating. As well as Levi, the history of magic, right? As well as transcendental magic, it's doctrine and ritual. Right? So, right, what does this have to do with Quentin Tarantino? Right? It has to do with the fact that I turned my back because there's no mystery. Right? That he thought that, right, that like making movies and clairvoyance are like somehow, right? Right? So how do all of these books tie in together? Right? I've said it 1,000 times. And I'll say it 1,000 more times, right? That when you draw a line in the sand, right? And you say, which came first, thought, or motion. You realize that both answers are equally valid intellectually. Right? And so playing devil's advocate, playing cold reductionist, soulless scientist, right? That memory, consciousness is a static embossment as a reflex of motion upon space. Right? That chemical strata, right? Atmospheric pressure, right? Cellular structure, right? Inherent vice, all of these things emerged through slipshod, haphazard happenstance. That's right. That's fine. That's fine. Right? That's fine. On some level, right? It could be true. Right? Manly Palmer Hall, right? The removal of hell is also the removal of heaven. Right? All things that are divine are things which can never change. Right? Therefore, right? And so the other side of that argument, right? The reasonable side, right? Is that there is a twofold manifold embedded within all of space, right? The first of which is a conscious field, a conscious resonance, right? Right? The collective unconscious, all these things, right? Diffused through every cubic centimeter of space equally, right? And infused within that is a infinite complex of nested polyhedra, which acts as a hologram of electric waveform probability potential. Right? So that's the chicken or the egg, right? This is your, right? And so I posit the latter, right? That life derives from intellect, that life is a psychic pressure, right? And so, right? What do I mean? Right? And this is mentioned in my other videos, right? That all of space, right? I don't even know what this is. Cool. Is right? Structured like this, right? Infinitely complex. This, right? Here's another one that's nice. Right? 29, right? That's nice. That's a vortex of power, right? All of these are nested inside of each other, right? And they represent divine abstractions, right? 53 subdivisions, 9 by 6, right? 8 golden mean spirals, right? Right? That these are all nested inside of each other in every cubic centimeter of space, right? And so it's the breathing of the conscious resonance, right? That exerts pressure upon these divine abstractions, right? Which mutates them, right? Into a crepuscular shadow of their idealized form. This is the philosophy of Plato's forms, right? That all things reside as idea, right? This is Russellian science, right? That all things reside as idea in the mind of God, right? And so, all instances of clairvoyance, right? Right? And anyone who knows anything about Socrates, right? Anyone who knows anything about apology, right? His trial, knows that that often people who call themselves clairvoyants, right, or mystics and seers, as espoused by Socrates specifically, they have no idea where their fucking visions come from, right? That it's a pure rhapsody, right? And so I suspect Quentin has like just like a little whisper of something, right? But not like this, right? Instances of clairvoyance, instances of remote viewing, instances of telepathy, instances of healing the sick, instances of, et cetera, et cetera. All these ideas, right? Is the mind of the adept, right? Tapping into the non-locality of the conscious field which permeates all of space, which their consciousness is it's the same, right? There's no separation, right? It's not I, it's us. It's not me, it's this, right? Which is consciousness, right? Right? So, right? Quentin stares at my headshot, right? Till he goes into a trance, produces a revolver and blows a fucking bullet hole through it because he's a degenerate. Right? Somebody prove me wrong. Oh, wait, you can't. Because everyone who knows him, they all know that he does these things. I think about that savage review that Stephen King left of Kill Bill. Wonder what he did to him then. Right? So, he set me up to be a movie star. Right? He stuck his nose up at me and turned his back on me. And so I turned my back on my career. Right? That's my right. I don't have to be a movie star. Right? I don't have to kiss Quentin Tarantino's ass. Right? So, right? We both failed our tests, right? I failed the telepathy test. I am the strongest clairvoyant of any millennial. Right? What, is there a Pepsi challenge? I'll take that fucking Pepsi challenge any day of the week with that Amsterdam shit. Right? And he failed to be a good person in the world. That's right. That's why we're talking about it now. Right? That I chose the right side. No. This is right. This is the most disgusting campaign. Right? Unrivaled. Right? He and I are a case study. He has spent 1,000 hours remote viewing me. Right? Is his wife involved? Right? Does he have a coven of degenerates? Right? That all watch me. Right? Oh God. Oh. How unfortunate he's not well. Right? My point is that screening of Jackie Brown that I've talked about in numerous videos that I've made, right? There were 500 people there that I stood in line for 4 hours, right? And so anyone who was there, right, they also remember him talking about getting a life-changing role and et cetera, et cetera. Right? That this is not, right? Oh. Right? Of course, Variety didn't report on that, right? Because I didn't bend to his psychic whim. Right? Right? He thinks that I'm an arrogant ass. And that's fine now. That's just fine. Right? Because he had every opportunity to just let it lie, right? Right? He steals my intellectual property. Right? I told him to take it for free, right? In April, when he really descended into black magic evil. And he told me to sue, and so I'm suing. Right? This ain't about money. Right? That's why I'm on here, right? Coming clean, right? It's about showing the world, right? This is your favorite foot fucking filmmaker, right? That shit about the feet, right? It's misdirection. Right? So, right? If you recall, right? Haven't had this in a while. My celestial vision board, and what's that in the middle? Right? The New Jerusalem, right? The cover of John Michel's book. Right? 5 golden mean spirals, right? 88 subdivisions. core of Atlantis, right? Cubic wave field, right? 2 9-sided polygons, every relationship. Right, and again, this is nothing, right? I got 60 fucking more of these, right? Right? But that's right. Right? So that's how space is structured, right? Right? So we say that life has a psychic intellectual origin. Right? We say that, oh, okay, that mind is a divinity. Right? And it's through thinking, right, that it engenders a pressure condition in the material world, right? And so as a small volume, or a large volume becomes a small volume, right? It creates friction, right? Space grating against itself, right? Until, right, the electric resistance becomes so great that it cannot remain inert space anymore and erupts into incandescence as physical matter, right? From dust to dust, alpha to omega, right? Matter emerges from space, matter returns to space, right? So, we say that these drawings, right? Drawings like this, right? Bring you into harmony, right? With the divine substructuring underpinning of the quantum hologram, right? Which is diffused within all of space, right? Right? What is this? Peter J. Carroll, right? Study of the hand, right? You see the hand in your dream, you control the dream, lucid dreaming, right? All instances of psychic phenomenon is the adept tapping into the non-locality of consciousness, right? And though I am on the frontier right now, right? It is the harmonizing of the atomic structure of the 2 disparate locales in terms of the brain of the adept, right? And the locale they seek to remote view. Right? That your electrons, right, that they have a behavior, that they're doing things. Right? Right? And so the highest levels, right, sees the adept behaving like God, right? And so, right, the synthesis of those 2 ideas is this, right? And that's Ari Emanuel, right? I cursed him to see my green Irish eyes, right? He knows me, he hates me. Does he hate me? I don't know. Probably feel sorry for me, really. But, right, I'm seared into his psyche, right? And what's that on top of his head? Lamed Mim, Lamed Resh, Molach, right? Right? This guy's in league with evil. That's the point, right? Right? Quentin is interested in satanic occultism, right? And so when I didn't bend to his intention, right, to his will, right, he said, "Oh, okay. Oh, you think you're as strong as me." Right? He turned it into this adolescent. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, no, the appropriate thing, right, was to produce the non-disclosure agreement, right? Right? Pay me something if he wants to use the scene. It's the most badass scene anyone ever sent him. Right? Right? And move on. Like, that's, right? Like, there's an actor that you can't control. Like, that's it. Like, that's, right? That's all. That's all. He has exerted so much of his psychic energy upon me, right? The 2 of us, right? Like, till the end of time. There is no, this ain't a fucking light switch. I've said it before. I'll say it again, right? That this is, right? And I live in palpable fear. Palpable fear. You know, like, why do I say these things? Why do I say these things? Right? Assuming that I am right, right? Which I am right, right? That Quentin has created a pathological psychology in both of our minds, right? That even though I'm the only one that's talking about it in public, right? He's living it in a palpable way too, right? That this ain't, right? It's a pendulum, this ain't, right? It's not a straight line arrow, right? This ain't a gunshot, right? That it's an oscillation, right? And so my point is that he's in my mind and I'm in his, right? That's equal measure, right? No free lunches, right? And so, right, if his intention is to cross his arms and go, no, I'm famous, I don't ever have to spend any time with this man, right? Then that without a doubt, right, unequivocally, right, engenders mental illness in both of us. That we both exist as psychic phantoms in the other's mind, right? And so, right, therefore, right, his intention, right, he doesn't expect this to persist for 20 years. That's my point. The last 20 years of his life, no less, right? Right? So I'm smart enough to know that. It took me, I trusted him. I trusted him for a while because I felt bad about Tribeca. I don't anymore. Nah, we're good. We're good. You shove that movie right up your ass. Right? But my point, right, is that if we don't come together, right, no matter what fucking they say in front of the camera, right, that like his whole life is in relation to me. That's it. Right? There's no. If we don't reconcile, right? First of all, right? I'm never gonna stop talking about it, right? I can't, right? And you see me looking at the door. I'm terrified right now. I gotta lock this door. Right? Right? And secondly, right? It's just so disgusting. It's so disgusting. I have no idea what he tells people, right? The people who actually know, like Mike, like Ari, people who know like what he does. Does he tell them, oh no, I don't want him to die. I want to keep this weird, fucked up, pathological relationship with him for the last 20 years of my life? It's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous when I say it because it is ridiculous, right? Therefore, right, he expects me to expire imminently, right? He knows exactly where I am, right? He's a sick degenerate who doesn't see what's good in his life, right? Right? So, again, I suppose I'll stop now. Know that life is not an accident, right? Life has a latent intellect. All instances of clairvoyance, remote viewing, telepathy, psychokinesis, thaumaturgy, all derive from the mind of the adept tapping into the non-locality of the conscious field which permeates all of space. Right? So, right? The drafting compass, right? The symbol of Freemasonry, right? Is the ultimate tool, right? Because it liberates your mind. It allows it to see the structural underpinning, right? Which unlocks, right? The sum total of the firmament, right? See what's good in your life. I'll read on the novel later. Uplift your soul to God. Like, comment, subscribe, share. God bless.